This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight we have a very special guest, Asra Nomani. She is the co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement and author of Standing Alone, an American Woman's Struggle for the Soul of Islam. Asra, what a pleasure, privilege, and honor to have you on the Glazov Gang.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate your invitation, and I hope we can have a good conversation. I'm sure we will.
Thank you, Asra. Look, so many things to talk about, and you've been saying so many things lately, many profound things, and great honor to have you on. So, Asra, one of the recent things you've spoken about is the left's cyber jihad against Trump and his supporters. Why don't we start with that? You have made a few comments on the left's totalitarian nature recently.
Yeah, Jamie, this all began because a few years ago after the Charlie Hebdo assassinations, I tried to really dissect phenomena that I know you all and you also personally have been the target of. And that was something that I called the Honor Brigade, a network of bloggers, activists, nonprofit organizations, and other leaders in my Muslim community who target anyone who talks about Islamic extremism as an Islamophobe, a racist, a bigot, all intended to try to silence folks. So, Jamie, I sit before you. I am a Muslim, and I want to ask you, do you hate Muslims?
Well, Asra, I've been thinking about this for years because myself personally, as someone that's dedicated more than 15 years of my life fighting on behalf of Muslim girls that are the victims of FGM and honor killing, forced veiling, etc., it just doesn't make any sense, right?
Right. And so the attacks on you, are meant to silence you. The attacks on your publication and the guests that you have on your show. And these are critical conversations that we need to be having. Once the Honor Brigade learns that I've even spoken with you, they'll try to smear my work as well as yours and continue to try to discredit from these critical conversations. So for these years, I've been trying to understand then, how does this Honor Brigade find a home in the West? And what I've been able to observe then these last few months is that just as over all these years, the Honor Brigade in my Muslim community has found partners among liberals, they have continued that partnership now in their fierce opposition to Donald Trump and his administration. And why? Because the administration has leading thinkers who recognize the issue of Islamic extremism, and that is a threat to the very fabric of these institutions that want to stop us from having these conversations. And so that is then how I came to understand in my mind this dynamic that I call the alt-left's cyber jihad against Donald Trump and those who might support him or those who even vote for him. It's an attempt to try to discredit anyone who is going to continue then this conversation about the serious threat of Islamic extremism.
Absolutely, Asra, and thank you. It's just incredible, as always, these people on the left that posture as these great free thinkers and liberals, quote unquote, and yet if you don't think like them, boy, do you get abused. And so speaking of this abuse, you have been writing about, in your own life, for instance, you voted for Trump, and you ran into some very interesting comments made towards you at Georgetown University. Tell us a little bit about what happened there.
Yeah, again, in this sort of journey of discovery that I've had, trying to report out, like I would report anything else out, the fierce opposition to any conversation about Islamic extremism, I ended up intersecting with Georgetown University faculty. And so I'm a former faculty member at Georgetown University. At the university, I led a project investigating the kidnapping and murder of my colleague from the Wall Street Journal, Danny Pearl. And at Georgetown, we were able to follow the trail and establish the link and the network in Pakistan of militants who killed Danny in the name of Islam. And so, you can't imagine how much it has broken my heart then to step forward as a Muslim, fighting for reform, for peace, for secular governance and women's rights in my community, and to face abuse and smears from faculty at Georgetown. First, it began with a researcher in the Center for Muslim Christian Understanding. That center is housed at a school at Georgetown called the School of Foreign Service. After my vote and my declaration that I had voted for Donald Trump, I received just fierce, ugly vitriol from another faculty member at Georgetown, a professor of peace and security studies, again in the School of Foreign Service. This person who attacked me after my vote was a liberal feminist. The attacker coming to me from the Center for Muslim Christian Understanding captured the dynamic of fundamentalist conservative Islam. And so together, these two forces have intersected, and in these recent days, you have written, I know, about this other sad revelation that the director of that Center for Muslim Christian Understanding is parroting the ideology of Saudi Arabia, arguing that slavery is acceptable within Islam and that sexual slaves is also acceptable. So this is a real crisis. You know, this is a crisis of our public space in America, our academia, our intellectual discourse being hijacked, you know, for the sake of protecting these Islamist governments that send money to these universities like Georgetown, really sabotaging any of the intelligent discourse we try to have, challenging the extremist interpretations of Islam. So indeed, like you mentioned, you know, this professor said that I'm not a human being anymore. She told me to F off and go to hell. And sadly, Georgetown has refused to do anything to maintain some civility in discourse by its faculty.
Sounds like a very open-minded liberal.
But that's what I discovered, Jamie, is I discovered through this experience the intolerance of the tolerance-loving left.
Yeah. And Asra, you're referring to, of course, it's Professor Jonathan Brown at Georgetown University, who's teaching that Islamic rape and sexual slavery and slavery, etc., are okay because Muhammad and the Quran sanction it. Not one feminist demonstration, I think, so far, right?
No. And, you know, I, as a Muslim feminist, challenge those interpretations. And in this Muslim reform movement that I helped to co-found a little over a year ago, we refuse those interpretations and say, granted, they are in the Quran, they were practiced in the 7th century, but like Christianity has had to do with issues in the book of Deuteronomy, we leave those passages in the 7th century and we move forward into the 21st century with feminist, progressive interpretations that are peace-loving and value the dignity of all human beings.
And Asra, let's talk about that for a minute. You know, you have some fascinating work that you've done, and you reach into Islamic theology and the text, and you find female figures that you use to bolster and empower the message of female freedom and emancipation, etc. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, you know, I'm smiling because I'm remembering an author, a poet. Moshe Kaf is her name. She's Syrian-American. And she's written some great poetry, of which I'll just paraphrase one. She talks about Hagar in the modern day seeing a therapist and being told, you know, you really need to write an email to Sarah and just kind of make things good. You know, she's really haunted by the friction that the two matriarchs of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam had when tensions emerged as you know, partners to Abraham. And so Hagar writes to Sarah and says, you know, we should have just ditched the old man and raised our boys together. And so it's a little bit offensive perhaps to some people, but it's just a humorous way to try to really take back some of the power of the feminine. Hagar, to me, is a real symbol of strength and courage. She was a single mother, as my read of history turns out to be, stranded in the deserts of Mecca, according to, the storytelling that we inherit today. And there was no 7-Eleven. There was no 24-hour Walmart for her to go get her bottled water. And so, she was a resilient human being. And that is really, to me, the touchstone for me as a woman born into Islam then, because ultimately, we stand alone. That's the message of the book that I wrote, that we stand alone in each of our lives, having to decide whether we are going to stand up with courage and resilience or be victims and collect our wounds, blame others. And I argue that we need to stand up with resilience and we need to stand up with moral courage.
Asra, speaking about courage, I find courage in almost every sentence you speak and every word you write. A lot of what I was reading just really, really touched my heart, your bravery. Now look, recently the bravery of a Muslim woman, let's say standing up for Trump on some levels, voting for Trump. Let's go back a bit. This is an incredible story. In 2003, you were the first woman in your mosque in West Virginia, and you insisted on the right to pray in the male-only main hall. Am I correct? Tell us about that. This was incredible.
Yeah, I was born in India, and my father, like a lot of the uncles in the community, inherited and imported to America this idea that women don't go to mosques. And so we did have women that went to the mosque. I wasn't the first to go to the mosque, but what happened, unfortunately, is a new mosque opened up in the fall of 2003, and they had designated the back door for the women and a balcony up at the top. And what I dared to do was walk to the front very innocently with my little baby, just a year old, on my hip, and I was blocked. The board president stood there and said, "Sister, take the back door." And he pointed to go around the building to this back door where I was supposed to take the back stairwell up into this balcony. And, some people will say in orthodoxy, we have the segregation and separation. But to me, this is a symbol of the second, third-class status that we have as women in too much of our Muslim communities. Because in that balcony then, we were told women cannot speak, women cannot stand at the microphone in the front in the main hall. And then I was told that we weren't even allowed in the main hall. And that was where I moved forward with my family beside me, my mother and my father with me, and we prayed in the main hall.
Thank you, Asra. We're running out of time. I wish we could talk longer, but before we go, so many fascinating things, so many courageous things. Now, you have written an Islamic Bill of Rights for women. Now, this includes an Islamic Bill of Rights for women in the bedroom, including sexual rights. Can we talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we have to talk about the intimate ways in which patriarchy and religion can enter into our lives, especially as women, and deny us fundamental human rights. And so I wrote an Islamic Bill of Rights for women in the mosque, and that covers our public space. But then in the bedroom, I also asserted that, we have intrinsic rights over our bodies, over who we love, over whom we marry. And the first right was the right of a woman to pleasure. My mother told me orgasm was too controversial a word, so I wrote the woman's right to pleasure. But ultimately, that does mean an orgasm. And as somebody who deals with this really, really painful issue of female genital mutilation, which is the cutting and destruction of a woman's clitoris, we have to be very honest, even if it makes us uneasy, about the fact that this act is a denial of pleasure. And what is the purpose of faith but to bring joy into our lives. It should not be a vehicle for taking joy from our lives. And so this issue of female genital mutilation goes beyond Islam, but it is also definitely an issue within our Muslim communities. And I really applaud so many women and men in our communities who are now starting to challenge those practices and say no longer. And we must allow everybody their right to joy, pleasure, and self-expression and self-determination.
Asra, thank you so much. We only have under a minute left. What would be your main message before we go in terms of the contemporary climate, Trump, etc.? Whatever that you're most passionate about at this minute. What would be your parting words for our audience?
Well, Jamie, I wrote my book in 2005, and at that time I considered it my manifesto for the middle path in Islam and in all of our communities. And what I would just urge people at this time too is from the left to the right, we all have to really try to move in our hearts to the middle path, to a place of critical thinking and compassion. And that's what I would just invite everyone to do, to really see the humanity in others and find solutions that are positive so that we can stem this tide of divisiveness that is so many people are trying to use to break our hearts and really transcend all of that with a sense of hope and goodness.
Asra, for those viewers tuning in right now that want to get in touch with you and support you and everything they're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
Thanks for mentioning that. I'm on Twitter at Asra Nomani and Facebook. My email address is just asra@asranomani.com. We're working on our Muslim Reform Movement webpage, and I invite everyone to go to the one we even have now, sign a petition that we have supporting the principles of peace, human rights, and secular governance that we're trying to promote in our Muslim communities. We invite those that are our neighbors in all other communities to join us, because everybody has a vested interest in the success of Muslims who want to challenge the extremism. And so please support us and don't be hostage to the fears of those that are in the Honor Brigade or the alt-left cyber jihad. We all have to really just stand up for our humanity in this world.
Thank you so much, Asra. I just want to say that it is an honor and a privilege to be in the company and also to speak with such a graceful, noble, courageous, and extraordinary person such as yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm not so graceful when it's 5:30 wake up for my son's school bus, but I'm going to continue to try, and that's what we all have to do in our lives, is just be the best we can in the world.
And we hope that you'll come back and tell us more about your story, okay?
All right. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Asra, and thank you for joining us. Make sure you get Asra Nomani's book, Standing Alone. And thank you for joining us. If you like this show and appreciate what we do, go to jamieglazov.com to support the show. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. Good night.